Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. For those of you new to my channel, I review all things movie and TV. So if you like what you hear, share, subscribe, and comment down below. Today we are talking about Palm Trees and Power Lines. I heard about this movie like a few weeks ago, and then I noticed that it was on demand. And I watched it, and I have to say, this is probably one of the best movies on grooming that I have ever seen. Like, it starts off one way, and it ends up a different way. And I actually, this movie ended and I couldn't believe how good it was. Like, that's how impressed I was by not only the storytelling, but the filmmaking as well. So briefly, the movie follows a teenage girl, Leah, who enters into a relationship with an older man. She sees him as like the solution to all her problems, but his intentions are not what they seem. So as I said, this movie is currently streaming on video on demand, and I hope it'll be streaming on Hulu or Netflix very soon. And so this movie is directed by Jamie Dack, and originally it was a short film. And so the director actually, she adapted her own short film so she could expand on different themes that she just didn't really have the time to do. So this movie isn't an extension of that short film, right? Because sometimes filmmakers make short films as concept pieces to show that it can be made into a feature-length movie, but this was not the case for this movie. And due to the subject matter of the film, it was incredibly hard to find financing and distribution. And most of the people or studios that she went to said they loved it, but you have to change the ending. And thankfully, she didn't change the ending, right? And I was reading an interview and she said, you know, like, you can't give up on your story. If you have a story to tell, don't give up until it's told. And I think it's a very good lesson for creatives and artists. The story is loosely based actually on the director's own experiences with an older man. And she explains how at the time that she was having these relationships, she felt like she was in control and she felt like she was guiding the whole situation. But after Me Too, she started to look back on these relationships and she started to wonder. And she started to sort of explore these new feelings in her writing. And the main character, Leah, actually is supposed to be a proxy for her younger self. And she combined her own personal experiences with research about manipulation and grooming. And the script is actually written with the intention of following the 5 stages of grooming, which is how I've divided my video. So before we get to these 5 stages, the film spends some time introducing us to Leah and her world. So the entire movie is told from this young girl's perspective, and the pacing of the film is really interesting. So I read somewhere that it feels like you're watching a car crash in slow motion, and that is accurate. Especially the second time you watch it, you're like, knowing where it's going, you're like, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And Jamie actually did study film history, and so she consumed a lot of foreign films. And so the pacing of the film is different. It's quite slow in comparison to American-made films. And the pacing actually helps us understand Leah a lot better, right? Like, it gives us the space to understand her. And the longer we follow Leah around, the more we hope he's not as, you know, this predator isn't as bad as we think he is. But of course, by the end of the movie, we realize he's exactly as terrible as we thought he was. And so briefly, before I enter into the 5 stages, I just want to talk about the main character for a second. So Leah is an ordinary teenage girl. She's currently on summer vacation, just chilling, doing what teenagers do on summer vacation, which is a lot of nothing. She spends most of her time with this girl, Amber, and a group of other teenagers, watching movies, smoking, doing all else, you know, just loitering at all hours of the day. She lives with her mother. And her mother feels more like her sister. It doesn't feel like a mother figure. And her mother is an interesting character because she's kind of in and out of relationships. And she kind of attaches to her daughter when she's suffering through a breakup or she just needs someone to console her. And her mother, you know, she's self-absorbed. She's a nice person, but she's totally, you know, in her own universe. And she treats her daughter more like a roommate that she vents to than someone that she's actively supposed to be parenting. Like, she doesn't notice anything's wrong with her daughter throughout this whole process. She doesn't wonder where she is at all these hours. You know, there's nothing, right? She doesn't push her towards anything, right? During the summer break, she's supposed to be doing her readings. She's supposed to be doing all this stuff. But her mother doesn't really check in on her. She makes comments here and there, but she's not much of a parental figure, right? She sees that her daughter is bored. She's always on her phone. She's always out by herself. But she doesn't do much to give her structure or accountability. You know, like she basically, you know, Leah has no one to answer to. Between the two of them, Leah seems like the more responsible adult, right? She's seen literally reminding her mother that she has work in the morning. She calls her out. She scolds her for her immaturity and bad decisions. Like she feels more like the parent than the parent. And even before this predator comes on screen, like she strikes me as someone with a good head on her shoulders. And this is important, right? The film spends a great deal of time basically saying like, this is a good kid. But however, the longer we watch her, we sense that there's something missing or like empty inside of her, right? Like you get the sense that she's just going through the motions. Like there's nothing really inherent there. She's present, but she's not really there, right? Like there's a scene where she's hooking up with someone her own age and she honestly just looks bored and indifferent. When she's with her friends, she's kind of on the outside looking in. Like her body is there, but her mind is elsewhere. And it's like, you know, you get the sense that she's trying to speed up the days, right? She's trying to get to the part where her life begins. And, you know, before this predator enters her life, you know, I think the vibe I got from her, she's wondering, like, is this as good as it gets, right? Is this what my life is going to be? Summer vacations with the same people, going to the same school, doing the same thing every single day. And the film is actually set in Southern California, even though I think it's shot in LA. And it's not actually supposed to be set in any specific place. Like if you watch the film, it just looks like it could be anywhere. And the setting is one of the sort of vulnerabilities or one of the reasons that this predator is able to sort of target Leah and get her to do what she wants, right? This kind of suburban, boring lifestyle. And here comes this man willing to break you out of it, right? So the setting actually helps us understand why she's so bored. And so I really liked Leah's character because, you know, anyone can be a victim. Like there's no prototype for the predator. Like you can have a good head on your shoulders, whether or not you come from a good family, a bad family, whatever, you know, you're susceptible to this type of manipulation, right? Grooming knows no bounds. You get to step one of the sort of 5 stages of grooming, which is targeting the victim, or in this case, the wink. So Leah first meets Tom by chance when she's sitting at a diner with her friends. Tom, which I seriously doubt is actually his real name, you know, winks at her on the way out, right? And she kind of like, you could tell that she kind of liked it. Like she was kind of shy. She looks down. She's like, oh, he's so cute. And the trouble kind of begins when her raggedy friends bail on the bill. So they're sitting at this diner and her friends decide they don't want to pay and they want to bolt. And the thing about Leah is that she takes so long to decide. Rather than just leave with her friends immediately, she sits there wondering what to do, right? She knows it's wrong not to pay the bill, but at the same time, her friends just left, right? So she has a good head on her shoulders, but once again, she kind of goes through the motions. And by the time she decides to get up and run away like her friends, it's too late. Right, and you really are always one decision away from a totally different life, right? Had she stayed and tried to pay the bill, she probably wouldn't have met Tom. You know, that's something to think about. So she escapes with her friend, but unfortunately for her, the restaurant manager or the cook was able to grab her. And then this Tom, this guy who winked at her, comes out of nowhere and is able to like kind of save her, for lack of a better word. And he literally appears like a knight in shining armor. The first thing I noticed about Tom is that he dresses very well. He's good looking. He has a nice body. In comparison to her friends and her mom's boyfriends, like this guy is clearly above and beyond. Like he's attractive. You know, he's like the competition in the suburbia is very low. There's not much to say. And like any good predator, he knows his limits, right? He knows he's treading very carefully in these early stages. You know, he saves her and then he kind of uses the justification of like, are you okay? To kind of make it seem like it was fine for him to follow her in his truck. And the whole time he's following her in his truck and he's trying to make conversation, you can tell that Leah knows that something is wrong, and even the audience knows that something is wrong, right? Like there's just something very creepy about a grown man following a teenager with his pickup truck. I think what Tom does well is that he comes off as like a concerned, responsible or older man, right? He tries to disarm her. He doesn't try to force her into the car, right? It's under the guise of, I'm just keeping you company, you know, so you just walk home, and once you're home, I'll leave, you know. And he tries to entertain her. He puts on some music, like he's trying to make her feel like he's someone that she can be safe around. And just before she makes the decision to get into his car, she says something like, "Don't murder me," which I thought was just like, oh. I mean, he doesn't physically murder her, but he emotionally destroys her. And the minute she gets into this car, the process begins, right? Like it starts, this wheel starts to turn. And he knows if he can convince her of this, you know, he can convince her of anything. And that's the thing about boundaries, right? The thing about Leah is that her boundaries are stronger than, say, her mother's, but they're still pretty weak, right? And she doesn't see that because she clearly goes into this car with strangers knowing that that's just not something you do. And she even voices that concern, like, I don't get into cars with strangers. And I think it's something to know, right? We're only responsible as the people around us. So again, in comparison to her friends who wanted to dine and dash, and her mother who dates whoever, she seems pretty responsible, but that's not saying much. And what makes Tom effective is that he literally charms her into submission. He's not a forceful person. He doesn't come off aggressive. He doesn't try to lay it on too thick, too soon. And the smartest thing he does, and that a predator can do, is give you like this illusion of control. So just before he drops her off at her home, he says, you know what, maybe you should take my number, knowing that she's 17 and he's 34. And he doesn't hide anything, right? Like if she asks a question, he just answers. He's like, yep, I'm 34. And there's no shame in it. There's no awkwardness in it. And because he's not uncomfortable, she's not uncomfortable, right? She unknowingly starts to kind of mirror his behavior. And, you know, in offering his number, he's basically saying, like, I'm a good guy. If you need anything, just let me know. And the whole time they're in the car, he doesn't scold her for what she's done, right? Instead, he praises her maturity level. He says, maybe you should hang out with people on your own level, like, which is very unusual, right? If at the end of the day, this is a young girl that dined and dashed, that's not something you should do. And that's not something a healthy adult would condone. But instead, he kind of starts the grooming process and tells her, listen, you clearly have way better judgment than your other friends, even though she's in this car with him. And that suggests the opposite. So Leah decides to take his number, and what's the harm, right? That's the danger, right? So it's like, okay, well, worst case scenario, she doesn't contact him, and he has no way of contacting her. And when she comes home from this first encounter, and she tries to go to bed, she can hear her mom literally hooking up with some random other guy in the other room. I think my vibe with Leah, right at the start of the film, is that she's looking for a guide or a mentor, or like someone that she can kind of look up to. And, you know, she's a very confident young girl, which is true for most teenage girls, right? Like, I remember when I was a teenager, I was very confident. I thought I knew everything. But there are certain things that, you know, adults see that we don't. And as a teenager, you don't know your boundaries, and that makes it easier for adults to manipulate those boundaries, right? Sometimes we think we're in control when we're young, and that's because we don't actually know the ramifications of what we're doing. Whereas the adult can see it better, right? Can see that you're unsure of yourself, and so they can start to help you make these boundaries to benefit them. So the first sort of phase of the grooming process is complete here, and then we move to phase 2, which is contact. From the moment she meets Tom, she kind of makes this instinctive decision to keep him a secret. And I think in some ways she knows that there's something wrong with him, like there's something off. And she's not ready for anyone to burst that bubble yet. Because if she were to tell other people about this man, they would berate her with, like, you know, they would do some research. You know, like they would tell her, like, listen, the math ain't mathin' with this man. And so she actively lies to her friends about this new guy that she's seeing. And, you know, it's one thing to sneak out of your parents' house to see a guy. It's another thing to sneak out of your friend's house to see a guy. Like, it means, like, you really kind of low-key know there's something wrong here. And the first time she does contact him, it's out of boredom, right? She goes home, her mom is preparing another date. She doesn't really want to stick around, you know, she doesn't want to stay in the house to have the misfortune of overhearing whatever they're talking about. And so she goes outside and tries to chill. And while she's chilling and just kind of listening and doing her own thing, she decides on a whim to contact him, right? She just decides to text him and then see what happens. During the second encounter, which actually feels more like a first date, I was struck by Tom's mannerisms. Like, he has this intense way of making you feel like everything you say matters. Like, he's very good at bringing him down to her level, right? So he leans over, he kneels down, he makes direct eye contact, he bends over, like he tries to make it seem like they're on the same level, even though he's bigger than her and stronger than her and just clearly, way older than her. But he tries to disarm her by, like, using his body and his voice. And the whole time, during this first date, she's talking about Instagram and hashtags, and he's acting like he doesn't know what Instagram is, right? He walks the line between friend and like lover quite creepily but effectively, right? At one point he kind of makes the joke of saying, what's wrong with chasing something beautiful, right? Like, he hits on her without overtly hitting on her. He wants to see how fast he can move the needle. And during this conversation, he asks her what her dreams are after high school. So this is the part where he starts to extract more information about her. I thought it was interesting how Leah outsources blame to her mother, right? She tells Tom that, my mom thinks I know what I should be interested in, and if I know this might help me get into college. But actually what she means is that she doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't really want to go to college. She literally is going through the motions, but she doesn't want Tom to know that yet. And what she's communicating is that she wants her life to start. And we've seen with her interactions with her mother that she could care less what her interests are, right? Her mother is not really breathing down her neck to pick a career and do something with her life. Her mom isn't really on her like that. But Tom doesn't know that. Tom is a very skilled predator, right? He extracts information and then he mirrors his behavior to match hers. So he's listening to her talk and then he counters, right? He tries to relate to her, and the most important thing that he's able to do is present himself as an alternative to the lifestyle that she's living now, right? A better alternative, like a way out. That's how he kind of positions himself. And so he's sitting there and he's talking about real freedom and how he's managed to, build a good life despite everything. And, like, there is a way out of this, right? Like, you don't need to go to college. There are other ways. Little does she know what he's actually referring to. And the whole time he's talking, Leah is looking around and she seems uncomfortable because she can detect some BS in what he's saying. And she asks him, what do you do for a living? And he quite literally says nothing, which is true because the women that he pimps out are the ones doing everything for him. So he doesn't actually lie. He just doesn't disclose everything, I guess you could say. And when it is time to leave, like after this first date, quote unquote, something changes in Leah, right? She's kind of done. She goes back to her friends. She's smiling from ear to ear. Her friends are watching a movie. They're not doing anything. They're just doing what teenagers do, which is honestly nothing. And she's unable to even pretend to want to be around them, right? So she, like, slowly and surely, just being around her friends becomes just not something that excites her, right? She goes, but she's wondering why she's going. But we have contact, and now Tom is able to become her friend, right? And this is the third phase of grooming. And after hanging out with Tom, she starts to message him more and more, and he becomes a friend. He becomes someone that she can talk to or vent to and open up to and just relax around, right? And Tom is very careful not to touch her without her permission. Again, he's listening to her. He's very attentive. There's nothing, like, he doesn't give off any sort of like vibes yet that he wants her in any way. He kind of gives her space. On their second date, he finds out more about her family. And this information about the family is very important because it tells him, how much can I get away with? Is there anybody looking for this girl? And he always waits for her to finish before, of course, mirroring her behavior. We find out that Leah's father remarried and basically has no contact with Leah anymore. And Leah also opens up about her mother and how she basically sometimes asks about her whereabouts, but for the most part, like, that's only because she's dating. And she kind of opens up about how her mom is maybe not the most observant parent in the world. And this is important for Tom to know, because he's literally picking her up in front of her house, dropping her off, and nobody seems to be saying anything, right? This guy, your daughter is being dropped off by a grown man and you don't notice. And so now he's starting to understand why that is. Watching Leah is interesting because you can see that she's fighting off her better judgment, right? Like, he's saying all the right things. Leah never gives him the satisfaction. Like, she never says, oh, you totally get me, or oh, you're so right, or oh yeah, like, I've never met anyone. Like, she never gives him like that full satisfaction. Like, she wants to believe that he has his best interest, but she never fully says it, and because she has some doubt, right? You never get that like, oh, you get me, or you totally see where I'm coming from moments. Instead, she goes along with it because she doesn't want to lose his company, but still, like, she kind of knows that there's something wrong. Just as she's asking him more about himself, he kind of deflects the conversation, and he's very good at, changing the mood or the tempo. He's always in control, and it's all about fun, right? So just when she's starting to probe into his life, he says, let's go in the water, right? And they kind of have this really nice beach day. And when she comes home from the beach, her mother is there with like one of her new boyfriends, and her mom assumes that she's spending all this time with her friend Amber, and which is quite disturbing, because your daughter is out of the house more than normal and you just assume she's with her friend, right? And what we can understand every time she comes home is that she's in no danger of being found out, right? No one's asking her where she is, and no one is really doing anything about it. And this is interesting because I remember when I was growing up, like, my dad would always ask about me. Like, even if I went to the movies with friends or to a restaurant, like, I wasn't even doing anything. And I had a friend that I would always go out with, and she didn't understand why I would get so freaked out when it was past a certain time. And she told me at some point, like, no one was looking out for her, or no one was texting her. Like, her parents didn't really care what time she went home. And at the time, I thought that was awesome. I was like, oh, that's so, I wish nobody was texting me. Like, I wish that was my life. But looking back, a parent's sort of ability to notice their child's behavior is really important, right? She's undergoing this shift and her mom doesn't notice, right? Like, clearly there's something going on with her. Clearly there's some, like, the math thing, a parent's ability to pick that up can actually save their child's life. So that's something interesting to know. The more time they spend together, the more she starts to really get attracted to him and like him. And that's the thing. He's just a friend. It's a friendship that naturally, quote unquote, became a relationship. But it's not natural. He's been orchestrating it from the beginning. So up until this point, Tom, has been very good at keeping their encounters, like, safe, right? They hang out on the beach or the truck, or, they chill on her side of the fence, right? Like, they chill where she's comfortable, right? He kind of enters her world and he makes himself a part of it, and he also stands out as someone that, could possibly get her out of this world, right? So he's very careful to make sure that he's always on her side before he slowly starts to climatize her to his world. First time they kiss, he asks her permission. And this is interesting because he's very, very good at making it seem like she's in control. And it's very subtle, right? Even this moment of them having their first kiss, he controls everything, right? She lies down, he lies down. He looks at her, she looks at him. Like, he doesn't have to say anything to control her. And what's important to note is that the more mature he makes her feel, the more mature that she wants to act, right? She doesn't tell her friends about him. She doesn't want him to know about her friends, which I think is interesting. And there's nothing to disrupt this world that they're in, right? This world that she thinks that, she's creating, but actually he's artificially building. And that's the thing. Throughout their whole time together, she doesn't tell anyone, and she never meets anyone in Tom's circle. It's just her and Tom the whole time, right? She never meets his family. She never meets his friends. She never wonders about his friends. She never asks these questions, and because she's too afraid to find out the answer, right? Like, who is this guy? Like, where is he coming from? So she's seeing him in isolation, and there's nothing to break her perspective of him. But when they finally do go from friends to lovers, Tom has done enough, like he's done such a great job of making her feel safe and secure, right? He positioned himself from the beginning as someone who she can rely on, right? Regardless of where they are. And so I think a lot of people, not just teenage girls, you know, sometimes when you're with someone or you like someone, you know, it's very subjective, the whole thing. And when someone makes you feel a certain way, you feel like the exception to the rule. You know, like, well, this person would never hurt me, or whatever he's doing, it's not going to affect our relationship, right? Like, plus I'm in control anyway, so if something is weird, I can, if there's any funny business, I can walk out anyways. But what you don't realize is that the hooks are already in, right? So this illusion of control, like I can leave when I want to. Yeah, that's technically true, but do you want to leave? Right? Like the sort of subtle effects of having spent that much time with someone that you feel, you know, is very important to you is not easy. So the turning point happens after this intense makeout session. So now they go from friends to just making out intensely, right? Their attraction is at all-time high, but they haven't crossed the line yet. And it's actually Leah who suggests that they go back to Tom's place. And she even asks hesitantly, right? Like she feels like she crossed his boundaries at some point. She says, is it okay if we go back to your place? Like if you want. Of course he wants to, but again, he gives her that control. Like I'll only take you if you ask me. And she asks. He can't suggest it, right? Otherwise that might raise too many red flags. And this moment of them going from the truck to the motel is the minute they cross over from like suburbia to like, you know, over the palm trees and power lines, I guess you could see, like what's on the other side, to this dingy motel. So now we go from her world to his world. And the minute she sees this dingy hotel, she knows that something is wrong. And whatever this man is hiding, it has to be big, right? Like as soon as I saw the motel, I said, oh my God, I was like, sis, you need to run. Like this is just terrifying. And I could actually feel her heart sink. Like she looks at him, she looks at the motel, she looks at him. Like she looks like, is this for real? Like you really brought me here? And he doesn't bring her to like any motel, right? He brings her to the dingiest, the most like psycho looking, random axe murder coming out of the corner hotels that you could ever imagine. And he lies to her and he says, well, he's in between places right now and this is only temporary. And he does this extra step of like trying to humble himself and telling her, well, I can drop you off at home if you like, right? Just giving her that illusion, knowing that she's too polite and too sweet of a person to ever say no. And I think it's interesting to know, but like sometimes our desire to be polite can actually override our survival instincts. Like you don't want to offend somebody. So sometimes for fear of offending someone, you'll actually do things that are against your own safety, right? Like you know something's wrong, but you're going to go ahead with it anyways because you don't want this random person that you met to be offended. A moment where she gets out of the car and she's about to enter into the room, and you could tell that she's like double thinking it, right? Like she's entering the truck was one thing. You know, they haven't left the parameters of the truck, but now the minute she decides to go into this hotel room is the minute that like everything changes. The whole time she's standing outside the door, you could tell like she's negotiating with herself, thinking like, damn, is this really worth it? And even when she decides to enter the room, which pretty much nails her coffin, she literally has her back to the door. You know, she's wondering like she knows this is exactly as bad as it looks, right? She's not all the way comfortable. She doesn't give him that full comfortability, right? She's not like, oh my God, of course, like I totally believe you, and she just barges in, right? She's not like, her brain is working, right? She's thinking like, this is weird. But she forces herself to be comfortable so he's not uncomfortable. And this scene is super important because even though we know it's wrong, we can kind of see her thought process. And this is the moment where you have to remember that the movie is told entirely from Leah's perspective and not Tom's perspective. And this is important because I was reading in an interview, you know, the director basically explains their process in terms of how they built this connection between Tom and Leah. And in the script, Leah does fall in love with him, right? She is in love with him. So love will make you do crazy things. And the actor who played Tom in preparing for his role you know, kind of played it as if his character loved her, or at least as much as someone like that is capable of loving her. And he didn't go into the role thinking, oh, I'm a master manipulator and here's my full MO. It was kind of a mix of things, right? It was like affection and also manipulation, right? And you see that in the way that their relationship is built. And Tom is so good at what he does. I mean, he's magnificent at what he does, to the point where the full magnitude of, you know, who he is and what he is hits us so hard at the end, because we're hoping and praying that it's basically worst case scenario when we find out what kind of person that he really is. And I think the thing that makes this movie effective, especially, you know, the second half of the film, when we go from the motel to the end of the movie, is we're not so much focused on the grooming process. You know, like, we already know that groomers and predators, they come in different shapes and sizes. Like, there's no, and like, a groomer could be anyone. You know, you never really know who people are. What's interesting instead is how the film kind of gets us inside Leah's mind and gets us to understand what vulnerabilities or what's inside her, deep inside her, that's making her open to Tom's manipulation. What is it that Tom can see in her that he feels he can kind of exploit, right? And the more time we spend with Leah, the more we're able to see why Tom is pursuing her the way he is. And this is important because from Leah's perspective, like, she's in love, right? So she's viewing him from the lens of love, and it's blinding her to otherwise clearly red flags. But we don't know what Tom is seeing, right? We don't know what Tom is seeing. Is he seeing someone that he can control? Is he seeing that you know, what is his perspective? You know, his version of love and her version of love are not the same thing. So as the movie goes on, you know, when she enters this motel room, she's allowing herself slowly to be seduced by Tom and his words. Like, she's giving him this massive benefit of the doubt. She's taking on, she doesn't know it yet, but she's taking on his point of view about everything, right? She's slowly adopting the way he thinks, to the point where at a certain point in the movie, she starts to actually speak like him and talk back to her mother in the same way that he was talking about her. Like, all these things are happening at such a subconscious level. The motel room basically confirmed her feelings that, like, there's clearly something wrong here. And this is the moment that told Tom, like, how much he could do, right? Like, how desperate is this girl for connection and for, you know, this relationship? Is she willing to step inside this world? Is she willing to kind of enter it with me, to be with me? You know, how important am I to her at this point, right? It becomes a checkpoint. She doesn't know it, but that's actually what it is. The minute she enters the room and the minute she's able to, like, force herself to be comfortable, he kind of understands that the sky's the limit, and he can get her to do whatever he wants her to do. And so in the room, he lays it on thick, right? So now we go from kind of subtle flirting, and I want you to, like, he starts to go in hard, right? You're not like any girl I know. I feel like I can be myself around you. Like, you can see me and I can see you. Fate brought us together. Like, he just starts laying it on like thick. And this is meant to ease his transition from friend to lover to eventually, you know, pimp. And during this encounter, you know, he's still careful to give her some illusion of power, right? Like, you know, he turns off the lights because she asks. He's very slow, he's very calm, like, you know, he's careful to make her feel like nothing bad will happen to her as long as she's with him. Watching her, again, like with Leah, she's an interesting character because she's finally having this encounter with this guy that she's had a crush on, but there's no fireworks, right? She's not all over him. She's not, you know, desperate to, like, latch on to him. Like, she's not, you know, like, all over him. Like, she goes through the motions. And by the end of it, you get the sense that she's like, ooh, thank God, like, nothing bad has happened, right? And I like how her character is written because it's not too, like, she doesn't have attachment issues like her mother. The morning after, they're chilling at the motel, and this motel now becomes their new normal, all right? So they kind of move away from her side of the fence to now hanging out on his side of the fence. And now he can kind of start accelerating the process of getting her to do what he wants her to do. And during this hangout, Leah, you know, she starts to sing him this very serious song. And this song that she sings is actually is really sad. And I remember when I was a teenager, like, I would listen to the most depressing music, like I don't even know what I was listening to, but I took myself so seriously. You know, the lyrics to this song, like your depression is mounting, the ashtray's filling because of it, bedside bottles half empty, the rest of it filling with your regret. Just how sad can you be, when nothing's really worth it, and if you look at the lyrics to this song, I'm going to post them on the screen, but it very closely mirrors the song sort of is about the deterioration of someone over time, and that's what's happening to Leah, right? Her depression is mounting and she doesn't really know it, and slowly she's dissolving. Loneliness is so severe, and the longer that she's with him, she's able to sort of convince herself that she can't live without him, and her hunger for an alternative is what keeps her hanging on to him, right? She's so desperate for another way to live, and he's kind of presented that other way. He is the other way to live. And the longer she forgoes her better judgment, the more open she becomes to Tom's wishes, right? Like Tom, in a lot of ways, actually reprograms Leah without her even knowing about it, right? And this reprogramming is interesting because when you compare Leah to her mother, right, someone who seems to be in and out of relationships, can't really focus on anyone but her own gratification, like this is her approach to life. And Leah, is someone that hasn't really formed an approach to life yet, right? She's still developing what her approach to life is, and Tom has entered the space to give her her approach to life, right? He's building her approach to life. She doesn't know it, but he's becoming the architect of how she will sort of continue moving forward. So he becomes so essential that without knowing it, he reshapes everything, right? He reshapes her mind, he reshapes her perspective. He takes control of her without aggressively taking control. And suddenly the things that she was sure about become malleable, right? What was once unthinkable become thinkable, right? And that's the problem with being a teenager, is that, your boundaries are not set in stone yet, right? Like they're malleable. So you might think you're sure of something until you meet someone that kind of could maybe convince you that you shouldn't be so sure. So once Tom sees that she's comfortable chilling at this motel, he starts to accelerate the process, right? He needs to get from lover to pimp quite quickly. And he goes from, picking her up in front of her home and dropping her off to literally being able to go inside her home and see not only where she lives, but how she lives, right? And Tom's shift in attitude is so subtle. Right, in the beginning, it's a negotiation, and he's like, what do you want to do? I can take you home, to just, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it. Right? So he goes from kind of flirtatious gentleman to like menacing pimp in a very short time period, right? I don't want you seeing other guys. You're mine. You want me to take you away. You want to run away with me. Nobody will love you more than I do. Like he starts to lay it on, not just thick, but quite aggressive, like letting her know that, me and you is mine type thing, like there's no negotiation anymore. But this shift in tone is important because now he can start giving her orders, right? Like get in the car, say this, say that, say this, say that. And he doesn't need her to feel anything. That's the difference. Leah is saying things because she feels like she loves him. And he wants to hear these things, not because he loves her, but because he wants to know that he can get her to do what she wants, right? He's looking for her submission, not her love. Right, and that's the thing that he's conditioning her to do, right? He's getting her used to the idea of obeying him regardless of whether or not she wants to do it, right? And that's not love. That's some predatory behavior. And the way Leah's mind changes throughout is very, very scary because it's a mind shift that she's not aware of, right? She keeps accommodating him time and time again to the point where she just wants him, right? She knows that something is wrong. She knows that something is off. But the thing that keeps her hanging on is the fact that he makes her feel like she's his number one, right? Like regardless of what he's doing, at least I come first, right? Like at least I'm, if not his one and only, the first, right? And that's not something that anyone in her life has made her feel, right? Her mother doesn't make her feel that way. Her friends don't really make her feel that way. And being someone's top priority is not something that she's willing to give up on yet. And that's how Tom deflects from his shady behavior, right? He reminds her that, listen, regardless, I got your back. Regardless of what I'm doing, I got your back. And that's quite terrifying. So, and the more time Leah spends isolated with him, the more dangerous this becomes, right? She takes him at face value, and this is important to know because as a teenager, even for me, like to this day, it's kind of stupid to say, but like you want to take people at face value, you know what I mean? Especially when you're really young and someone comes onto you like that, like you don't think to look into them like that. Right? Maybe your friend would, but you wouldn't think to do that. So she, at no point in time does she snoop around or Google him or really doubt anything that he's saying, right? And I think the reason for that is that she's almost too scared to look, right? And it could be that she's too scared to look and that she doesn't want to break his trust, right? She wants him to believe that she loves him. And in him believing that, he will look out for her best interests. And that's really naive and terrifying. And there's only one moment in the whole movie that we catch a glimpse of the real Tom, or whatever his name is, and she looks away, right? They're hanging out in the hotel room, and then suddenly they get a loud knock on the door, and his tone totally changes, right? He gets super aggressive, and the minute she hears it, she gets up from the bed, she's pacing around, like she knows something is wrong. She's looking outside, but she doesn't want to be caught, right? She wants to know what's going on, but she doesn't want him to think that she doubts her, like there's all these mixed emotions, right? Like your self-preservation goes away if you think you're gonna lose somebody. You know, the only thing that we're able to see from her perspective is that he goes outside and he's leading this man away. And the whole thing is very shady, right? The whole thing is very shady. It's like, first of all, this is a motel. I thought this was temporary. Why is it that you know this woman? Why are you helping her out? And that's the thing, Leah knows that something is off. Like, this is not temporary. At no point in time does this man talk about moving out. Does he talk about packing up and leaving, like what his next stages are? We don't hear anything about his business. We don't hear anything about anything, right? And whenever she does try to ask about it, he deflects, right? And there's a scene where she's actively like, why don't you tell me what's going on? And he kind of gives her some runaround, but the thing about Leah is that she continues to make excuses for him, right? Like, oh, you were helping her out with her boyfriend, or oh, are you dating other girls? Like, she kind of tries to keep the worst case scenario, because she's a teenage girl, right? In her mind, the worst case scenario is not something that she could possibly imagine. And that's the other thing to understand, right? Like, it's like worst case scenario, this guy is cheating on me, but to think that he's a human trafficker when you live in suburbia, when you live in this small world, is just unthinkable. Just before the abuse begins, we get a very clear sort of foreshadowing about what's to come. So they're at a diner, and this waitress comes up to Leah and she says, do you need help? Right? Like, do you want me to call the police? You know, I've seen him here with many girls. And Leah is just like, what are you talking about? You know, he's my boyfriend, I love him, all this stuff. And this is the first time as an audience we're like, oh, girl, run, right? And Leah still holds on to him, right? She still gives him the benefit of the doubt. She thinks, worst case scenario, he's seeing other girls, which is very naive. And again, because everything's told from his perspective, we don't actually follow Tom. We never see the real Tom properly. We only get glimpses into who the real Tom is. And this is really important because when we get to that final scene, when we fully find out who Tom is, we sympathize and we understand why Leah followed him this far, right? Like, we understand why she does what she does, even though we're disappointed that she does it. It takes us to the final stage of grooming, which is when the abuse begins and the truth comes out. Leah's frustrations get worse. Her mother doesn't notice anything to save her life, and her friends find out and basically call him a pedophile and a pervert. And when her friends find out, she's unable to even listen to them, right? She storms off, she attacks her friend, and she leaves. She doesn't like what they're saying because some part of her knows that they could be right? And she doesn't want to hear anything, and she's tired. So now that her worlds have kind of collided, she has no choice but to go back to Tom and ask for a way out, right? She knocks on his door and she basically says, can we run away together? You know, you're the only person I like, what's the plan? And it's at this point that Tom takes full control, right? He knows he's going to take her away, but he needs to wait for her to do it. He kind of lays it on thick, right? He says anything that comes to his head, right? Like, your friends and family never mattered. The only people they need is the two of them. Like, they can make it. They don't really need anyone else. And, you know, he says something so eerie, right? He's like, all we need is each other and that perfect face of yours, right? And that's what he sees in her. He sees youth. He sees someone that can make him a lot of money, right? Like, he sees someone that, you know, is a commodity. He doesn't really see a person. And we get subtle glimpses into this, right? He's always examining her like she's a piece of meat, especially the second time you watch it. He comments on her fingers, saying she has like princess fingers. He comments on her face. She's always looking so pretty. He wants to see her in her bikini. Like, he's kind of observing her and seeing, you know, first that she's very good looking, and second, how much control can I really keep over this person. He gives her a bracelet, and this bracelet ensures that even if things go wrong, there's a glimmer of hope that she'll come crawling back to him, right? So this decision to give her a gold bracelet he brands her without branding her, right? He presents everything as a gift and as something that he's doing out of affection, when really it's a mechanism of control. And so the morning of their departure, she's packing excitedly. Of course, her mother is nowhere in sight to know where this girl is going. And she's been waiting for such a long time for her life to start, and now it's starting, right? It's starting with Tom, and things are going to be great. She jumps in head first, nothing, you know, like hoping for the best. Go from this dingy motel to this very nice motel, right? Like, finally, he's living up to this potential. Like, there's a certain, you know, expectation when you're with an older man. Like, you hope that he has things and he's not staying at a dingy motel. Like, that would defeat the purpose of dating older, by the way. And so she's excited, right? She's like, finally, we'll get to be alone together and have a proper good time. And the minute she steps into this hotel room is the minute that she nails her coffin fully, right? Like, she is at his mercy from here on out. And in the hotel room, she asks him, like, did you think that day at the motel or that day at the diner that we would be here today? And he said, no, I never thought I'd be so lucky. Like, just talking nonsense, basically. And she makes a comment and she says, I never thought someone like you would be into me, right? So she sees him as a very mature, responsible, well-meaning adult, right? A stable, caring person. He comes off one way, but everything he's shown her is the opposite, right? He comes off stable. He comes off with someone with a good head on his shoulders, and yet everything he's shown her is the opposite, right? Dingy motel, never talks about work. We haven't seen friends. We haven't seen anything. But still, she hopes that he's not as bad as she kind of low-key knows he is. The movie reminds us of, you know, what's going on inside her. Like, what are the vulnerabilities that exist inside Leah that enable her to fall victim to this guy? And he says at one point, you know, I've wanted you from the moment I saw you. And this is exactly the point, right? Like, that's all that mattered to her, for someone to put her first and to look out for her well-being, right? First among everybody. She wants to be first in someone's life, and he claims that she is, so that's enough. In the motel room, he sits her down and he lays it out. He says, you know what, I've been thinking a lot about what your mom, you know, what you've told me about yourself, and I want to take care of you. I want to be the guy that protects you, this and that. And the way he frames it is interesting, because he makes it seem like, okay, you have put me in a position where I have to take care of you, right? Like, based on everything you told me, I want to be that guy to help you out. You know, like, basically he's saying that she's a burden, but it's a burden he's willing to take on, right? Like, you put me in this position and I'm happy to take on this role. And that's how he can kind of change it at the end, right? He's very clever. The minute they step into the motel, it's a totally different vibe than the last motel, right? This hotel is a lot nicer. And the first time they're kind of being intimate, he totally, like a light switch goes off, right? He's no longer asking her what she wants. There's no negotiation. He's telling her what to do, and he's no longer putting himself at her level, right? He kind of actively orders her to strip, get on her knees, and this is the first time you're seeing him above her, right? Like he's letting her know. This is a more explicit sort of scene of, right? Like they're no longer being intimate as one, right? There isn't that kind of like, oh, you know, he's coming down to her level. He's protecting her. Instead, he orders her to go down, and that's important, right? This shift of getting her to think like we're no longer equals, right? I'm more important than you are. Scene just before we find out more fully who the real Tom is, that he clearly brought her to this hotel to break her in, right? He has her lounging by the pool in her bikini, and he's looking at her up and down like he just hit the jackpot. And it's likely that the man that he arranges to meet with her is a man that saw her, you know, by the pool. And that's the scary part, right? The whole time Leah is with him, she's relaxing, she's having a good time. She has no idea that she's being advertised for services, right? She's just going around in her bikini, having a good time. And meanwhile, there's a bunch of creeps that are, you know, looking to spend the night with her. She just doesn't know it. And I thought the worst thing about this movie, and also the best thing about this movie, is the cruelty in which the real Tom is revealed. Like, it's absolutely terrifying, right? Like, there's no coercion. There isn't a moment where he pins her to a wall or he threatens her. So when she finds out who he really is, her heart sinks, right? She's totally destroyed. This is actually the worst case scenario. Like, I can't imagine a worser case scenario, right? All her everything that she's kind of oppressed or kind of, you know, pushed down has come out. And the whole time he's talking, right, he's trying to sweet talk her into it, and you can tell she's just like, she doesn't believe a word coming out of his mouth, right? She's disappointed, she's disgusted, she's shocked, she's terrified, she doesn't really know what to do. Reluctantly agrees to go along with it. And the reason she goes along with it is because he makes it about him, right? He basically undermines what she's about to do by making this client, an extension of himself. He's saying, you know what, you're doing this for us, so don't think that you're with him, right? You're still with me. Like, he's kind of manipulating her in that way, right? And his whole thing, again, he's very smart, right? He's like, this is how I take care of us, because you want me to take care of you. You told me you needed someone, and this is the only way I can figure that we can both survive with some money. But he kind of puts the burden back on her for the burden that he's taking on, which is crazy. I don't know how they shot this, but it feels very real. Like, you feel like a fly in the room. And again, the only reason she's going along with it is because of him. At this point, she doesn't exist anymore. There's only what Tom wants. You know, what Tom wants, Tom gets, right? And this scene was terrifying. This older man comes into the room, and he tries to make her comfortable, but he's a total pervert. And the whole time she's pacing around, she looks visibly uncomfortable, her hands are crossed. She looks like she wants to run for her life, but at the same time, you know, she doesn't want to disappoint him. Like, she's too shocked, you know, she's in total shock as to what's going on, right? Like, and it's very realistic reaction, because no one thinks that this would happen to them. So when it does, it's like, how would you react? And the whole time I'm watching this creep like approach her, it's clear that he was coached by Tom. It's clear that he was told what to say and how to say it to get her to do what he wants, right? And again, like, when you're watching him, like, she could easily leave the room, right? She could push him away and she could leave and she could scream and, you know, no one would say anything. But again, with grooming, it's like psychological. Once you have the mental hold on someone, you can get them to do whatever you want. And you see that in this scene. She's having panic. She looks like she's on the verge of a panic attack. You know, he assaults her. He leaves. I mean, that whole scene was just, like, the way he was talking to her, like, you could tell she wasn't listening to a word he was saying. She was just like, let me just get through this, and then she runs. And that was the moment where, like, her instincts she couldn't really deny them anymore, right? She just booked it. And unfortunately for her, Tom was able to apprehend her just before she was able to get out of that hotel. After this first encounter, like, this is quite scary, because this is the moment where Leah realizes who Tom is, and Tom knows that he's exposed. And he doesn't try to fight it, right? He takes her out to eat. He can read on her face that she's uncomfortable, she's angry, and he doesn't go after her, right? He knows she's gonna run. he knows he's, and it makes you think like, how good is this guy? Like, how many years has he been doing this, right? So Leah is she's in shock. She's paralyzed. She runs away from Tom. She's sitting, she doesn't know what to do. She's rock bottom, right? She's crying. Instead of calling her mom, she calls her friend. Even then, she never tells anybody what happened. And that's the thing, right? She never tells anybody about who Tom really is, what went down. She claims they had a fight. And she tries to go on with her life as if it's normal. And so when Leah goes back to her life, at first you think she's relieved, right? She's back in her own bed. She's back in her own house. She's back on her side of the fence, right? Like, she's back to her world. And there should be a comfort in that, right? She doesn't really want to be alone, right? She spends some time with her mom who doesn't realize she was gone for a whole weekend or God knows how many days. She tries to go through the motions, right? She tries to ease herself back into this world. This time period is really important because as I'm watching Leah, I'm thinking, oh my God, maybe she's scared this guy will come back. And then the longer we watch her try to force herself back into her life, you realize that it's not, she fears that he won't come back, right? It's not that she's looking out to see if he's there. She's wondering why he's not there. And that is so scary, right? Like, he's managed to like reprogram her in such a way that she's literally wondering where this man is. Just thought that not only is he not coming back, that he doesn't even care enough to contact her, after all the time that they had spent together. Like, this cripples her, right? She's not interested in anything. She's not interested in going back to school. She's not interested in hanging out with her friends. She's not interested in anything. And she still is wearing her bracelet, right? She's still thinking about him. He's still like, his vibe, his aura is still with her, right? And she gets so, frustrated, and she's unable to get him out of her mind that she ends up calling him. And of course the phone is disconnected because he's smart, right? He disconnects the phone. And so she has to make the effort to go look for him. She crosses those power lines, those palm trees to the other side, and she aggressively looks for him. She knocks on the door, he's not there. She finds this girl that lives there, quote unquote, and she basically begs for his number, right? She's begging him. She's like, please, I want to talk to him. What's up? Like, she just wants to hear his voice. And this last scene is the saddest scene I've ever, like, it hits so hard because, the movie begins and she's just a girl, passing time, bored. And now she's on the other side, right? It ends with her talking on the phone at this dingy motel, right? Like, she's too far gone, right? She will never go back to that side again. Like, he's ushered her into his world. And, she says she misses him. She's so happy to hear his voice. She was afraid that she lost him. Like, the mind control has fully set in. I was reading in an interview that this ending is really interesting, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but the director had read a story about a survivor who actually endured something like this, and she went back to the motel in which she was staying with her, with the man that she thought she loved, so the man that was trying to pimp her out. And in this story, the survivor was quite sad that he wasn't to be found, right? Like, there was this sort of mix of emotions in which relief that you're no longer with that person, but also sadness that they're not with you anymore. And I thought this movie was excellent because it shows you how manipulation doesn't happen overnight, right? It happens over a period of time, and it happens like very gradually, right? It doesn't really matter if you think you have a good head on your shoulders or you don't. Like, anyone can fall victim to a predator, right? Like, and it happens faster than you can think about it, right? And I feel like these experiences are so common and people don't really talk about them because maybe they think they're the only ones who have gone through it, or, they're afraid that people might judge them. And, I'm interested to hear like how many of y'all could actually relate to something like this. But I just thought the ending was quite devastating because he literally unravels her over time and she doesn't know it, right? Like, she doesn't even know, like, she can't see it. It's just like tunnel vision. All she sees is him. And that speaks to how great of a job that he was doing. And again, like, manipulation is not an overnight thing. You know, like, you make concessions slowly until, you know, your boundaries expand until they dissolve, right? And it's an amazing film, and I actually couldn't believe how good it was. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.